There are weapons of conquest that are not merely bullets, bombs, nuclear fallout. There are weapons such as fear and prejudice and envy, weapons that are found only in the minds of men, and that makes them even more dangerous. A contemporary of Jules Verne, an astronomer, a true scientist by the name of Percival Lowell, in the late 19th century, drew a series of drawings that he had observed through a 24-inch telescope at his observatory of the surface of Mars. And he drew an intricate, detailed map or grid of canals of the canals that he apparently had seen on Mars. And as years progressed, he even ascribed names to continents and major metropolitan areas. This was put together on the flimsiest of evidence. And even so, he submitted papers to scientific journals, and this was at one point almost considered to be a scientific fact, that there was indeed life on Mars and that there were canals in advanced civilizations. We now know that that's not true. What Dr. Lowell was doing was engaging in what's called ad hoc science. Ad hoc science is when a scientist gets the scientific method backwards. The theory is put forward as the conclusion. And then he proceeds to try to find evidence to support his conclusion and dismiss evidence that falsifies his conclusion. And this is what we're seeing today in the global warming realm. Recently, we have discovered that there has been a conspiracy among scientists involved in global warming to oppress evidence and to falsify their findings. And that is because research is driven by money. Dr. Esteban Sarmiento almost said as much on a recent radio interview where he talked about Artipus ramus, that they'd found Artie, who's supposedly the oldest known fossil of a human, a modern human, that they found 3.5 million years or whatever. He as much as said that it was almost getting ridiculous now because research was being driven by grant money, and that after 20 years working on a project, it would be difficult for scientists to admit that they hadn't found anything. So they're under a lot of pressure to find the oldest. 30 years ago, Lucy was the oldest they had found in China and or in Ethiopia. Then they come up and they find something that's Artie's even older. And now scientists are going to be under pressure to find something older. I mean, what's next? 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 40 million, and they criticize Bigfoot field researchers for being nuts. They've completely thrown objectivity out the window, and the only point I'm trying to make is that scientists are not really doing real science. They're doing commercialism, or they're fueling research grants because they can make a living doing it. And it's as simple as that. And the whole ad hoc approach of putting your conclusion up front, that's what's at the heart of every conspiracy theory. It's what's at the heart of UFOs and Loch Ness Monster, even Bigfoot and Ghost and things like that. It's okay to believe in these things and search for them, but to understand that it's more of a belief than it is a known fact. The problem is that when scientists come along who have credentials and they tell you this is a fact because we say so, They don't tell you that they're really forensic scientists. A forensic scientist is someone who is paid to tell you so. And that's the point I'm trying to make. In Plato's book, The Republic, there is a allegory that demonstrates man's quest for knowledge. Plato had you envision a prisoner who was confined to a cave, and his only contact with the outside world was through a crack in the cave wall where all he could see is shadow and motion. And from shadow, with shadow and motion being his only tool, he had to attempt to discern and define what existed beyond the cave. And that is the dilemma that man is left with. If you follow a strict Aristotelian path, that man is the measure of all things, and that man somehow has complete knowledge, then it would only be what you could observe. And there is much more beyond what just man can hear or see or use his own senses to discover. I'm getting bit by these no-see-ums. What was occurring in the late 1800s was that there were scientists that strongly, very much wanted to believe there was life on Mars. And there were scientists that very much did not want to believe that there was life on Mars. You can hear all this wildlife around here, birds and stuff. When you have that type of passion in people, it creates an intolerance for ambiguity. Hence, Plato's inconvenience. Because with Plato's rationalism, ambiguity would be part of the puzzle. You would have to think out every process until it could continue no more, and then either falsify it or strongly go on another channel of thought. Unfortunately, when modern day research is driven strictly by research grants and money, you see this type of discipline wane. When someone who was a former vice president, and I'm not going to put any moral judgment on Al Gore, but he has a vested interest. He has a vested interest in advancing global warming causes because of his political action committee and his company that makes millions off of this. To try to debunk it would be illogical. I'm not one of these new world order guys, but I do know when there is a battle for my mind and everyone else going on. To paraphrase the great writer Rod Serling, there are weapons of conquest that are not merely bullets, bombs, nuclear fallout. There are weapons such as fear and prejudice and envy, weapons that are found only in the minds of men, and that makes them even more dangerous, because if you could control a prejudiced population by playing on their fears and giving them reason to feel envy towards another country or civilization's way of life, then you're on the way to determining which political and economic system that you can install, because you've been able to invoke these great weapons in their minds, which would have a fallout greater than any nuclear fallout, because it could throw this planet into a dark age that we may not emerge from for 1,000 years. And I really think that's what's at stake.